The Own Your Intuitive podcast is for the creatives, spiritual entrepreneurs, and light workers in the world. The shining ones who have been told to dim their light and stop believing in magic. I say screw that. The time to rise is now. To bring your gifts out into the world in a big way, creating a business that feeds your soul and your bank account. You are a magical being with the potential to change the world, one human at a time. The time for you to own your intuitive is now. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, friends. We have the most exciting guest ever today. And I say this with so many different levels and layers of love because this podcast has been in the works for months. And so the fact that we get to sit here today and share your magic out into the world is the greatest gift ever in the history of the entire land. And I love this human very much. We have had our paths cross multiple times throughout the last couple years. And so I don't want to make you wait anymore. It's just such a tease. Today we've got Rachel Wright on the Own Your Intuitive podcast. Rachel, how are you?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. When you said months leading up to this, I was like, are you sure it hasn't been years? Like, I feel like we've been trying to do this since before we even knew each other. So I'm so excited to finally be here. And you're right, our paths have crossed in so many different ways. Like, had we not met at one of the path intersections, we would have had many other opportunities to meet. So clearly that was meant to happen.
Predetermined, predestined along the way.
100%, which is amazing. I love it.
Totally cool. And now that you've said, I got shivers because it's such a true story that, you know what I mean? The universe was like, here you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Like, had one of us been not feeling well one day, like we would have met 2 months later and then 3 months after that, and so many different mentors that we share. And yeah, it's very cool.
That is so fun. Well, that's a fun way to start today. Now, one of the greatest things that I love about every human being on the land is their origin story in the way that they define it, because there's no right or wrong to any of these questions. So can you just take a minute and let the listeners know your origin story?
Oh, what a fun question. Wow, Tamara, that got my head thinking in a totally different way. I love that question. My origin story. Okay, so I was always a very curious child, very, very curious about everything. I was the child that wanted to know why this, why that, and not in the way that I just wanted to drive my parents nuts, because, you know, there was always that friend too, but because I really wanted to understand. I wanted to know why things happened, why people thought, why people loved, why some people seemed rude or mean versus other people who were nice, and some people were complicated. Like, I was just a very intuitive, questioning child. And as I grew up, I realized that I either wanted to be a performer or a therapist. Those were the two paths that life kind of led me to. And I figured out that I could do performing on the side and fill up my cup and also bring other people joy without having a degree in theater. But that if I wanted to be a therapist and have an impact in the world on people's relationships and mental health, that I was going to need a degree. And at that, granted, like, many people are doing beautiful things without degrees and helping people in those areas, but in the way that I wanted to do it, I knew I needed it. So I went to grad school, went to undergrad, had my sights set on private practice. I was like, I want the room with the couch and the window in a city. And that is all I would see. It was like, before even I had the idea of vision boards or visioning, like, that was the vision I would think about all the time. And I got it. I had my office in San Francisco. It was exactly what I pictured. You know, it was like Sex in the City meets therapy. I'd commute in on the train and I was like, this is amazing. And until it wasn't. And I started really seeing people come in, specifically couples, because over time my focus narrowed in with couples, and couples were coming in for the same thing over and over and over again. And it was all past the point. It was all reactive. instead of proactive. And I started realizing that while I was doing great work and there were many therapists doing fantastic work, that the couples therapy system was completely broken. And that I was participating in something that was not actually helping change the course of people's relationships. It was putting Band-Aids on things that were gushing blood already. And through many, many conversations with my amazing husband, who thinks far more logically than I do, I'm the emotional visionary type person. And Kyle's like, great, but like, how do you explain that to someone? So through many conversations with him, we realized that together we could actually be proactive about mental health and about relationships and sex. And so we started our business to do that. And here I am.
Oh, there's so many juicy tidbits to go back to. Well, and I think that there's a level in which, for first and foremost, there's not a lot of people that I've had as guests who say, when I was young, I wanted to be a therapist and in theater type thing, and really fulfilled exactly what their childhood dream was. So I just want to put a kudos out to that, sidebar.
Thank you.
And the other piece of this is like, when you say you were curious as a kid, but you were curious to the emotions, not, all the other parts that, humans do. It was more like, it was really cool to hear you say, like, it was like, why are they doing it this and causing this discomfort or this emotion or that emotion? And it was such emotion based.
100%.
Did you know that as a kid? Like, were you did you have that comprehension that you were emotion based?
I definitely knew that I felt things deeper than other people. It came back to me in the feedback sometimes of, you're too sensitive. Like I had some family members tell me that. I had a few friends that, friendships would end and they're like, you're just so sensitive. And for a long time, I thought that was a bad thing. And that was when I was really in the throes of my own anxiety, was when I thought that my sensitivity to emotion was a bad thing. So I was trying to have this like wall up as to, not be too sensitive, quote unquote. And that's when my anxiety was really bad. So yes, I knew that, but I didn't understand that it was actually a strength and somewhat of a superpower for me. I thought it was more of, this is something I have to back off on because it makes other people uncomfortable.
And so at what age did you start putting the walls and the protection in place in order to almost shrink yourself for those around you?
I'd say probably middle school.
So like 7, 8, is that?
Yeah, like 11, 12, kind of around the age where you start, at least for me, and like sociologically, you start to really want to fit in. We moved so I grew up in Northern California. I was born in San Francisco, and it was very like, you be you, you do you, that kind of vibe. And we moved from there to Southern California in Orange County. And that is the exact opposite. And I wore my Birkenstocks to school on the first day of 4th grade, and I got made fun of. And I didn't understand. They called me a lesbian at school. And I didn't understand, we had tons of lesbian friends where I grew up. So I was like, why is that a bad thing? Like, what? And what do my shoes have to do with, like, if I like girls? Like, I just did not understand the whole thing. And so through the years of living down there, so I was like 9 when we moved. So I would say probably about 4 years later was when I really started to put those walls up, to try to fit in, have friends. I dyed my hair blonde. Really great photos though. Great photos.
I feel like I should add one to a show note or something.
Yeah, I can send you one for sure. But it wasn't me. It wasn't me. But it was me, looking back at it, it was me finding me. And had I not gone through that, I wouldn't understand now the power in not having those walls, and me being okay with not necessarily being friends with people who do think it's too much.
I find this fascinating because I was always told I was called, surprise, Rachel, I was called too sensitive too. And like, they'd be like, oh, Tamara, just can cry on the dime. Like I had a dial that I could turn on. She's not really sad. She just is a fake crier. And it'd be like, right? Like that's a thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear you explain this from your perspective, and that we both have had conversations about anxiety being something that we've struggled with throughout our lives, and hearing it tied to the emotion or the inability to share our full emotion without fear over how the other person was going to receive it.
Right. Totally.
I'm just like, I want to ask you about, how the anxiety presented in school, and maybe share that little kind of story.
Absolutely. I did not feel anxiety until I was 19. So there were many years where, developmentally I was living in this, I'm just being a normal teenager kind of narrative, which I was. Teenagers dye their hair and they experiment with different friend groups, and, they try smoking cigarettes and pot and drink and whatever. I wasn't doing anything that was so out of the norm that was off. And I didn't experience anxiety in high school, at least not that I remember. And looking back now, I really don't feel that I experienced it. And then all of a sudden, one day I was sophomore in college. It was my first apartment living with other girlfriends. And I was getting ready to go to my serving job. And I had a panic attack. And I didn't know what it was. I thought I was dying, actually dying. I could not breathe. I wasn't far enough into my degree yet to have taken abnormal psychology. So I hadn't even learned about what a panic attack was in school. So I legit thought that I was dying. Called my mom, and she lived 45 minutes from where I went to college. And I was like, I need you to come here. I'm dying right now. And she showed up and she brought me a Xanax. And I said, Mom, I don't need a Xanax. I think I need to go to the hospital. And she goes, no, you're panicking. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm having a heart attack. And I as I'm talking, right? And she goes, just take this. And if in 15 minutes you still feel the tightness in your chest, we will go to the hospital. So I was like, okay, cool, fair. Trust my mom. So I took the Xanax, which was her friend's. Whatever.
I was going to ask where that came from, by the way. I was like, how did your mom just know to show up with a Xanax?
Right. So my mom's best friend at the time, who she's still very close with, she has OCD and would occasionally need anti-anxiety medication. And so when she got the phone call from me, she immediately called her friend, and her friend was like, take this, go see her. So I took the Xanax, and within 10, 15 minutes, I was back to quote unquote normal. And in that moment, I was like, oh shit, that wasn't a heart attack. That was clearly anxiety. And I had not experienced anything like that up until then. And after that point, it got really bad. That experience was so scary for me that I started having fears of then having another panic attack in public. What if my mom is not there? All my friends were going out and we were going to parties. What if this happens and we're at a fraternity house? And then and this was all me wanting two things. A, not to burden, quote unquote, other people. So it was people pleasing. Mm-hmm. And then B, it was the same mechanism of not wanting to overwhelm people with my emotion. So same thing as being, quote unquote, too sensitive. It was not being afraid to show the vulnerable side of me to other people. Because on the outside, people saw me as this very extroverted, which I am. I'm an E in Myers-Briggs. I'm an extrovert, very extroverted, very comfortable in my skin, a performer person. So it was never oh, look at Rachel, she's so shy or afraid to be her. It was very much oh, look at Rachel, she's very comfortable in who she is. And so when I would present otherwise, it was jarring for people. And so I almost felt like I had this image to keep up of this confident, extroverted person. And that created a lot of anxiety because I wasn't feeling that on the inside. And so that dissonance created stress.
Well, and I think I like to bring it back, but that's a very powerful thing to experience and to start to have realizations about at the age that you did, right? Because I know that there's people that are, in their 40s or 50s that are just coming into the very understanding that you're saying that I've got to keep it together, that I've got to put this up. You know what I mean? Like I can't show people my vulnerability. I can't let people like see and understand what is really physically happening to me because I don't want to be a burden.
Right. Right. And I'm truly so grateful that I went through it when I did, because most people don't. They are older, and I am so, so grateful that I had the support in therapy and I had medication and I was able to really figure out what was going on. It kind of continued. It got better, but continued. Had the worst anxiety of my whole life around my wedding to Kyle.
Okay, stop for a second though. Yours and Kyle's meet story is my favorite story you've ever told me, so I don't want to get to your wedding yet. I want you to tell the story of like your and Kyle's relationship, please.
Oh, I love it. So we actually met when my anxiety was at its lowest. I was so comfortable in who I was, and that's probably why. Anyway, okay. So we met. I was in my master's program. So fast forward, so 19 panic attack, kind of got it under control. 21, I graduated college. I also started my master's program, and then I was 22 when I met Kyle. And I met Kyle at a restaurant. I took the job to essentially support myself while I was doing my internship through my master's program, because it's, not paid at all. And I got hired at a new restaurant. He was on the corporate training team, and I hated him so much. He was just the worst. And he thought I was the worst. And truly, it was because, like, now we look back on it, and he was covering up and being a way that I could only be in my dreams. Like this dictator, like, this is how it is. This is how it's going. Like, I did not have it in me to be that type of a leader. And then I had everything that he was afraid of, which was like sitting in the front row, asking all the questions, not being afraid to say, hey, I don't know this. Can you explain it better? I want to be the best at this. I was very much an overachiever, type A. And he was like, why are you so annoying? So we met, we hated each other. A year went by. We texted occasionally. There was something that really drew us together, but it felt very much at that time like an opposites attract type thing, which is not a relationship format that I prefer or endorse.
Yeah, but was it really good in between the sheets, Rachel?
Once it happened, yes. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely. It was one of the things that drew us close to each other. Was there was this undeniable physical pull. I mean, it was very like it felt like a magnet.
That's so awesome.
Yep. So literally we started dating, and he told me he loved me within 3 weeks. We both knew that like that was our person. We were like, this is it. Like, holy shit. We moved in together within 6 months, and we were married 2.5 years later. So yeah.
That's so fun. So now we can get back to your worst panic attack on your wedding.
Yeah. So we're engaged, we're planning a wedding. We started our business and we're planning our wedding and moving all within the same year. So, just like really lighthearted shit.
Yeah.
And wedding day comes, and it was basically, now looking back, it was all of the things that had triggered my anxiety to begin with. It was, I have to be something for all of these people. I need to show up. There's pressure on me today to be the bride, whatever that meant to me. I don't even know. And it ultimately resulted in me having a panic attack at the synagogue in my wedding dress. And it was a nightmare. It was my worst nightmare come true. Like, as somebody who really struggled with anxiety and got stuck in the what if loops a lot, this was one of the what ifs. Like one of those things that you just pray does not happen. It happened. And what it taught me was that I needed to change how I was thinking, because this day was for us. This day was for both of us. And logically, I knew that. And yet I allowed my fear of letting down other people get to me so badly that it became about everything else besides that.
And so can I ask how that affected like the day? Like, was it first thing in the morning? Did it affect your, you know what I mean? Like right before going down the aisle? Like
it was right before I went down the aisle.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was full makeup, hair done, in my dress. Everybody's dressed. It was all my bridesmaids, my mom, my about to be mother-in-law, all of the women, you know, hanging together in the same room. And I started feeling lightheaded. I walked over to this little like side sit thing, pew. And I sat down, and I remember that numb feeling of tingling going down my body. And I started to not be able to feel my fingertips, and my hands started sweating. And I was like, oh my God, I'm about to have a panic attack. And I started throwing up. They brought over the trash can. I was sweating. And my makeup woman was so, she's like, it's okay. We're going to powder your nose. Like, she's like thinking totally logistically. She's like, you've got this. Meanwhile, Kyle and the guys are upstairs ready to walk down the aisle. And somebody, I don't even remember who it was now, but somebody went up there to tell them, you know, just, we're going to be a little late. Everything's fine. They did not tell Kyle that I was having a panic attack because they knew that he would want to come down.
Right.
And help. And I'm very grateful that they didn't, because he is so attentive and loving and courteous that he would have been like, fuck you all, I'm going to help her. Like, and deep down, I wanted it to go on. So they waited. I think we were delayed by like 20 minutes. And the worst part is that some people thought that I was freaking out about marrying Kyle. And that was for me the hardest part, because the assumptions that people make, that was hurtful. I was like, why would you even think that? Like, no, this has nothing to do with it, you know? And of course, some of the people who thought that, those were the people that I was trying to please that day. And so it reminded me of the power that we have over our own experiences. And that if I had truly taken that wedding and done deep, deep, deep down what I had wanted and what Kyle had wanted, I don't think it would have happened. And it shifted my entire life, because in that, after that moment, when I had time to process it all on our honeymoon, it was a very conscious decision of, that's not going to happen again. I'm not making huge life decisions based on other people's shit ever again. Because look what happened. Like, I tried so hard to keep it cool, you know, our day. And yet I was still sitting there about to marry the love of my life, the person that I love more than anyone on this planet. And I was worried about other people.
Well, there is the saying, we break down to break through.
Yep. And that's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. So I got a great therapist. We moved out of where we were living, which was causing a lot of stress. And that's when we moved to Denver. And we basically cocooned for like a year and a half. We both went to therapy. We really got clear on our business. We started expanding. We started serving more people. And I have not felt anxiety now, like at all, for almost 2 years.
Well, I think it's a really, really powerful thing that you're talking about, because I've openly shared, and it's been on the podcast thread, that, you know, even my husband, when he went through his emotional thing, and I've been in therapy since I was 20, I'm just gonna, you know, put that out there. And I have maintained going back to therapy anytime that there's bigger emotional stuff than I know I can do on my own. I need to have the support with me to battle through the deeper, dredges of the, and I say this with great love, the more trauma we have had in our life, the deeper the work is in order to release it. And so having somebody there, and, even recently Jeff has gone back to therapy. So I think it's really powerful what you said too about not only you, but Kyle made the decision to do it at the same time as you. That's kudos to Kyle. Woo woo, Kyle.
Yeah, I know. He's the best. And truly, he wanted two things. He knew that on, his side of the fence, he was standing in his own way a lot for business stuff and in life. And then also he wanted to make sure that he was doing everything he could to be there for me without falling into caretaker enabling mode. And because of the dialogue that we have in our relationship, utilizing the tools that we do, he was able to communicate that with me so that I could actually help him find a therapist to do that. And that understood what I was going through, that understood what he was going through, and support him in a way that was really, really powerful. So we'd both go, we made it our own little, we'd walk separately in Denver and, then have like a lunch date after therapy. And it became a huge part of our life there. And it was, Denver to me will always be this place of healing.
And you had two different therapists. I just want to bring that up for people. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the reason why we didn't have a couples therapist was because that was not our issue. Like, that was not what we needed work on. It was truly our individual selves that needed the healing and the growth. We were wonderful together. None of this was ever our relationship. It was 100% our two sides of the fence interacting in the relationship, not the relationship itself.
That's such a powerful statement to make. Like, I love that so much, because there are people who are in relationships who know it's not their relationship and they don't know what to do in order to solve the separate problem. Because when they're together, they're fine, but there's something that's just a little bit not working from their personal, whether it's, again, past trauma, whatever it is, that keeps resurfacing.
Totally.
I want to go back to, you said, so you guys met, when you were in your early 20s and you guys were in the restaurant industry. So where in this story did you guys, because before you got married, you said you started a business 2 years prior to that. So how did you go from working together in a restaurant and you was it in the private practice after that started?
Yeah. So I was in private practice, and when I was coming home every night, we would have these debriefs, because that was one of the many tools that we implemented in our relationship, was nightly debriefs. And I would essentially complain about how it felt unethical that these couples were coming into my practice and paying me for therapy when I was teaching them how to talk. Because that's not what therapy is. Therapy is not a workshop. Like, it's not. And Kyle helped me realize through that there was actually nothing really between. Like, yes, there are workshops here and there from different people, but there's nothing when you think about, okay, we're a couple, we want support. What do we do? It's therapy or a book. And that's it. Like, yes, again, there are some things in between, and there's a lot more now, but when we were having this conversation, there was really nothing happening in between. And so it was Kyle's logical corporate trainer brain that was like, well, why don't we create something that is in between that you can give your clients? Like, the tools that you taught me, why don't you teach those to your clients? And so he helped me put all of these scientific tools, all based on research, into essentially like a packet of paper. And so I would hand that out to clients before they'd come in. And if they were already clients, I gave it to them. And they stopped coming in because that was what they needed. And so it was wonderful because we solved one problem, but then also created a new one because my practice was like empty. And that's when we realized, like, oh, people actually need and want these tools. And he said, well, maybe you can like teach them online or sell the packet online. And I was like, I can't do that without you. You help me turn this stuff into understandable information. Like, I need you. And that was literally the beginning of what is now Wright Wellness Center.
I just love the beginning of business stories.
They're all so interesting.
Right? Like, it's just like the conversations that are had, like, oh, you know, it's usually something is missing. We know how to like bring it into the world. And then the bravery, because it does take bravery. It takes, you know what I mean? Consistency. It takes momentum. It takes all of those things to actually be willing to be the one to bring it forth. Because I'm sure the first, you know, little bit that you and Kyle were doing this together wasn't like, look at us, we're so happy we're doing the exact thing that we're here to do. It's so great.
No. And honestly, like, there's still so many times where we'll look at each other and we're like, why are we doing this? Like, why did we choose this? And then, you know, of course, 5 minutes later, we're reminded by something. And when we're working with people, we never feel that.
Yeah.
Ever. It's the times in between, or the calls with people where, you know, we see themselves holding themselves back, or one partner says well, we're just going to work on it on our own for a little while. What does that mean? Like, it's things like that where you see someone that you know you can truly help. And I think we've all experienced this, no matter what, you know, if you're in business or not. You see someone that you know you can help. They have the resources to help themselves. It's like you've led them to the water. They're like, I'm so thirsty. And then you're like, okay, drink it. And they're like, I don't know. I'm more comfortable being thirsty because I don't know what it feels like not to be. And so it's really that those are the moments where I want to pull my hair out, and not because of sales for the business or revenue or anything like that, but because watching people be in pain and knowing that they're this close to having something that can take that pain away, and them denying that hurts me. And that comes full circle back to the empath stuff. Yeah. Like, I feel that in my body, and it's so hard. And that, to me, that's the hardest part about business for me.
Well, talking about empath, when you were describing your panic attack on your wedding day, I was like, oh, I need to tune down. I need to tune down. I'm feeling everything that Rachel's feeling right now on her wedding day. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, I started to sweat. My hands started to come down. I'm like, okay, dial down, Tamara. This is because I tune into the energy of who I'm doing the podcast interview with, right? So I can, you know, understand and guide the conversation based on the emotion of the person that I'm speaking to, right? Which is a great superpower for anyone who is listening, who is an empath. It is a superpower when you understand that you control it, that it does not control you. For so long as you do not bring the awareness to it, that you own it, that it's yours, that it is part of who you are, and you can adjust yourself accordingly to that, it will run the show. It is like in the background, you know, causing a whole bunch of mayhem. And so I just want to bring that up for anyone who's listening, that an empath, the more we don't look at something, the more it affects us, period.
100%. And that's exactly what we see with couples. Is, well, if we don't look at it, it'll go away. If we just don't talk about this one issue that brings up all the problems, then we'll be fine. But the issue's like life. And you can't not bring that up. Like, it would be like me saying, oh, it's fine, I had a panic attack on my wedding day. We just won't talk about weddings anymore, and then I'll be okay. Like, that was not the issue. The issue was within me. And so, yeah, it's hard. It's really hard because we can get so comfortable in the discomfort.
Yes.
And it's scary. It's scary to think, what would life be like if I was comfortable? What would it be like if we weren't fighting all the time? What would that even look like? And for some people, that thought is scarier than staying in the discomfort.
Oh, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you feel when couples think or have been told or create the belief that they're just addicted to the drama?
So First of all, I really dislike when words that are like psychological diagnoses get pop culturized. So when words like bipolar or addicted get tossed around like they're just like the subway or pavement, I'm like, no, those words have energy. They have meaning and they have diagnoses and they mean very, very serious things to many people walking around the planet. So when people say like, oh, I'm just addicted to the drama or they're addicted to the drama, they may be conditioned to a certain pattern and be very used to it. And that may feel comfortable, but truly being like addicted to drama, then we're looking into personality disorders. So I'm very careful when people use terms like that because they do all the time. Like it gets tossed around a lot. And I really try to kind of correct that in a gentle way of what is it that feels addictive and like why, what are you seeing that makes you think that? So that we can maybe, if it's a pattern, then we can pattern interrupt. But interrupting a pattern is different than healing an addiction. And I think we all forget as humans the power of our words and language often. And when we use words like addicted, that has a very different connotation, different meaning, different energy, all of the things than comfortable, pattern, used to, things like that. So yeah, I don't like that term.
No, and I didn't think you would. And I just wanted to bring in awareness because I think that that's a powerful thing that you're talking about too. And especially from the perspective of, I know that, for those who don't know, that Rachel's here to bridge the gap between a therapist's couch and, coaching in the level of, couples so that they can get the proactive support that they need. But then they also have the scientific therapist thought pattern and processes in place and tools to ensure that, you're doing the full spectrum with them. Right.
Yes.
And like being able to have that conversation, because what I often say, our words can do one of two things. They can amplify our message or they can destroy it. That's the only two things that words have the power to do. Like everything coming out of our mouth has a frequency. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad that I was guided to ask that question because, right, like, could you tell us some more things that you hear so that people who are listening might be able to kind of like draw themselves to in their own relationships that they might be saying or using right now to kind of help them understand, how, to move that forward and maybe reach out to you or whatever?
Absolutely. So I think number one is assumptions. So we hear a lot like, oh, well, and in traditional, like, quote unquote traditional, in heterosexual relationships, a lot of the times the female will reach out. And when we ask to have both people on the phone, it's, oh, well, he'll never go for that. And Kyle gets like, if he were a cartoon, there'd like be steam coming out of his ears when people say that, because he's like, do you want to effing ask him? Like, have you asked him if he wants to be on the call? So if you catch yourself assuming things about your partner, go ask. Like that, just ask. Another thing we hear a lot are generalized terms such as always and never, which are typically not ever true. So if I were to say to you, oh, I never feel that way. Like never, like what actually happens never or always? Hardly anything, especially in human behavior. Like we're crazy. We are a crazy species.
Yes,
things do not always happen. So if you catch yourself saying like, you always do this, or I'm always stuck in this, check that. Like, is it that you're often stuck in it? Is it something that's coming up a lot? Because when we say things, especially to our partners, of you're always doing this, they don't even hear the doing this part. They just heard you always, and their defensive shield went up. They're like, I don't always do anything, so I don't care what came after that statement. You just tried to accuse me of something that's not true.
Right.
Or same thing with you never do the dishes. You never change the diapers. They've never done it, ever, not one time. Because that's where our mind goes, is we try to find the holes in what our partner's saying. So that's a big one. And then the last one that I'll mention is this fun little linguistic trick that Kyle and I have been noticing a lot. We've been doing intensives with couples lately, and it's been very interesting because we get to spend a lot of time with them. And what we've been seeing often is this funny little English trick of I feel like I da 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 da. So somebody will say, I shared how I felt. And in a 5-minute monologue, there was not one emotion. So really you did not share how you felt. You shared what you were thinking, starting your sentence with, I felt like.
Yes.
So then when their partner says, well, I disagree with that, then we hear, you can't disagree with my feelings. Well, you didn't share your feelings. They're disagreeing with your thought. So that's something that has been coming up almost every day that we've been seeing clients. And I would encourage anybody listening to kind of catch yourself. We all do it. I try to not do it. I don't never do it. But I try to not do that and lead by example with it. So if the words I feel are coming out of your mouth, ask yourself, are you actually expressing a feeling? Like, I feel exasperated. I felt scared. Not, I felt like I was going to die. Okay, well, that is an expression of how you felt in your body, but what was the emotion that went along with that? So I felt terrified when my body felt like I was going to die, right? Like there needs to be some emotional word with I felt. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we just start to align our thoughts under this guise of I'm sharing my feelings, and you're not.
And there's such a difference between thought and feeling.
Literally, they are not remotely the same thing. Like,
right? Because I know some people might be listening and going but I can't tell the difference between what my thought is and what my feeling is, right? So can we just touch on those and separate those a little bit, just so that if somebody is going I don't get it.
Absolutely. So very, very, very simply, a feeling is an emotion. Mm-hmm. End of statement. A feeling
like guilt, shame, resentment, happiness, joy, bliss.
Yes. Embarrassed, excited, scared,
overwhelmed,
marvelous,
lonely.
Yes. Yeah. Those are all emotions. In fact, one of our freebies that we have in our hub is a feeling sheet with communication scripts, because a lot of times we'll go with the primary, the primary colors of emotions. It's happy, sad, angry. And then anything past that, we're I don't know. I was just sad and angry. No, there's something underneath that. There's more. So yeah, grab that. So those are feelings. Thoughts are actual thoughts. They're statements. They're things that you think. It's your internal dialogue. Mm-hmm. So if I think that I am going to have a great day, then I may feel excited. If I think that my body is fat and disgusting, I may feel sad and shameful. And then vice versa, our feelings can create thoughts. So if I'm feeling embarrassed, a thought may be, oh, I'm so stupid. Or, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But your feeling is not, I shouldn't have done that. Your feeling is embarrassment. Your feeling is shame, right? If you're feeling grief, if you're feeling sadness, the thought is, I miss my dad, or we used to be really good friends. Those are thoughts. The feelings attached to those would be the emotion. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And I
Okay.
think that this is really important because I think that from the level of the work that we do, there's a lot of emotion-based stuff involved, right? Because we can only go so far in a relationship, in our businesses, in our lives, on thoughts. But eventually, the emotions are the things that we work through in order to push into the next level in our relationships, the next level in our businesses, the next level in our lives.
Yeah.
And so I really think that that was a powerful conversation that we've never had on the podcast before. So what?
I know. And honestly, I haven't had that conversation on any podcast. I don't think that I've differentiated between those for a long time. So that was great. And it's important too, because if we're not aware of our emotions will control us.
Yes.
Like, and that's the thing, is that when people say, well, I'm just not an emotional person, the subtext of that is you're being controlled by them, because we're all emotional people. All of us, emotions drive everything that we do, whether you're aware of it or not. So the choice is, do I want to be aware of my emotions or let my emotions control me without knowing what's going on? We're all emotional people. It's total BS when somebody says I'm not an emotional person. All that means is I'm not in tune with my emotions, or I haven't been taught how to be in tune with my emotions. Because that's something where our society totally lacks. And
I think we could go on a little, we could go off here about like conditioning as children.
Yeah, yeah.
We were both told we were too sensitive. Right there, we were told that our emotions were uncomfortable for others. And, you know, the capacity in which we tried to dim that down.
Yep.
Because, you know, I didn't want people to think that I was a fake crier. Like, come on. Like, that's
right.
Well,
nice. Because the implication of that is you're manipulating people.
Right.
Like, what? And there you are feeling your feelings, and they're like, wow, you're really being manipulative. Is the subtext.
Empath, Tamara.
Yeah. Oh, Tamara, I used to do the same thing. My family would be like, oh, she's going to cry again. Because like every single time the whole family would be together, something would be said, and my eyes would well up. And eventually I would just start going into the bathroom to cry. Yeah. And so then I would lie, and I'm like, oh, I have a tummy ache, you know, and I'd be sitting in the bathroom crying. And luckily my mom was one of the only people who really got it. And so she was there for me most of the time, but the rest of the family, like for the most part, oh, sensitive Rachel crying again.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I want to bring this back to like, imagine carrying that all the way through into your relationship with someone.
Oh, yeah, it's awful. I mean, we see that all the time. The stories that we have from childhood, whether they are traumatic or not. I mean, that's also another thing. Like, trauma does not have to be a rape or neglect or something that immediately comes to mind when you think of trauma. It can be traumatic to be told that you are too emotional over and over and over again. Like, trauma is not defined by how bad something was or the violence that surrounded it. It's the impact that it had on you in your life and how it's showing up.
And I'm being called to say this one too. Other people have it worse than you, so you have nothing to complain about.
Oh God. That when you said that, my stomach literally turned upside down and I wanted to like throw up on the computer. It is not a comparison game. Like, you, just like you get to be grateful for abundance, that does not mean that you cannot give back and acknowledge that there are people living with less. You can still want more for yourself and acknowledge that there are people living with less than you.
And in truth, the more, if we were to choose abundant relationships and choose abundant careers and choose, then we could support so many other people with that
Right.
abundance, right? Like it's such a, but like, and I'm saying that from the level of imagine being in a relationship, being told that you don't want to complain because you have nothing to complain about. And then you're in a relationship and you are afraid to tell, your partner what's going on because you have nothing to complain about. And I feel all of your people right now.
Yeah. So if you feel unsatisfied, dissatisfied, unhappy, like there could be that there is room for growth, which there's room for growth in every single relationship. Kyle and I teach this stuff together. We still do things to grow together. It's not, you don't like hit a finish line. The finish line is death. Yeah. And perhaps maybe not, but like, at least for what we are on this earth right now, the finish line for our relationships are death, unless we choose to terminate them before. So we hear sometimes like, oh, we've been together for 34 years. Like nothing's going to change. I can't get to know my partner better. Our preferences change. We change every day, literally every day. We could have an experience that changes the course of our entire life that we may know about or not realize yet every single day. So we're constantly learning and growing about each other, well, about ourselves and with each other.
And that's the choice, right? Like that's the greatest choice that we have. Like we can choose to want to experience this life in the healthiest and most expansive way with the person that we are with, so that we can like cherish the moments more and experience them more in it. And like, I love you. And this has been like so powerful. What an important conversation to be having. And so like, if people are listening and they're like, oh my goodness, she's making so much sense to me. And I know that this is something that my partner and I would be able to expand into, having like, and they've been afraid to have these conversations with their partner, and they've been afraid to bring up different things because they don't have the vocabulary and they don't have the understanding. Where would they go to find you and Kyle? So, and I think it's so powerful that you and Kyle do it together so that there is the balance, right? For both partners feeling heard and not like it's an attack on either front. And so how do they get in touch with you guys?
So 2 places are the best way to go. Number 1, check out our website. You can read about us. You can show your partner things. We also have a vault of free resources for you. And there's a lot of educational blog posts in our podcast. Like if you just kind of want to learn more, check out the website. If you're ready to chat and you want to talk just in theory or about working together, follow us on Instagram. I mean, follow us on Instagram anyway, because it's really fun. I love Instagram. It's so fun.
So fun.
In terms of like connecting and DMing or conversing, that's probably the best place to do it. It's just so simple. It's so simple. So our handle is Wright Wellness Center. And then we each are the Wright _Rachel and the Wright _ Kyle.
And that's WRIGHT.
Correct.
Just throwing that in there.
Yes.
One of the ways, because I know that you guys have a very special way that you end your podcast, but I have a very special way that I have. And it's like, don't think about the first answer is the right answer. So you're not allowed to put your like I'm thinking face on.
Okay.
And you can only give one answer, no matter how many you want to say. You can only say the first one that comes to mind.
Oh, shit. Okay.
All right. What is the one book that has impacted your life in the biggest way?
The Disease to Please.
The Disease to Please.
Yes. 100%.
Well, that makes sense after our conversation.
You're like, and that tracks. Yes, it's an incredible book. Unfortunately, the author of it passed away at a far too young of an age, but it is the book that I have purchased the most for clients. I send it out as gifts. My whole family has read it. Every woman in my family has read it. It is an incredible book that not only is educational, but it's actionable, and highly, highly recommend it.
Amazing. That sounds like something I think every human needs to read.
No, like really. Yeah.
Because as a diehard book reader, like I cannot stop reading. Like I'm reading or writing. Those are like my passions. So I like to collect all of these books so that I have a list that I can refer back to at some point.
Totally.
Well, Rachel, I love you, and I'm so grateful that we were able to put this together and get to, bring your message out into the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love this conversation. I'm really excited to share it out there, and just thank you for having me.
And for everybody that's listening, make sure that you follow Rachel and Kyle on Instagram. And I'm so excited to drop even more information on you guys in Transformation Tuesday next week. Have a marvelous day.